I took my LSD. Oh, never mind.
Talk Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the blacksci-fi.com website, and welcome to the May 13th, the Friday the 13th edition of Black Science Fiction Radio. My name is William Hayash. I'll be your host for tonight, and our special guest is actually someone who lives in the same town that I do, who I've never met. Please welcome Jessica Cage. How are you tonight?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me on the show.
Oh, it's our pleasure. By the way, it's raining over by me. How about by you?
We have a little bit of a drizzle. I'm kind of outside of the city, so it hasn't really reached us yet.
Oh, so where, if I can be so bold as to ask, what part of the area do you live in?
I'm like 2 steps out of Chicago in Blue Island. I can cross the street and technically be right back there. Yeah.
Okay. No, I know where Blue Island is well. I'm right now. I'm a transplanted North Sider. I grew up on the South Side.
Have a lot of friends who are in that situation.
Yeah. And did you grow up here? It says born and raised, but, you know.
Yes, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and then we moved a little bit farther south, and then just a tad bit further south, and now I'm in Blue Island.
Okay. Well, at least you're not as far south as the Elvis Museum or anything like that. There are some people who live so far outside the city, and then they have the nerve to call themselves Chicagoans. So this is different.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, well, like when you were like in elementary school, did you go to one of Chicago's public schools or a private school here in Chicago, or were you already further out than that?
Oh, no, I went to Garrett A. Morgan, the public school. My entire family went there up until my very last brother. He's the youngest of the family, and that's when we moved away from the area. And then from there I went to Morgan Park, which is another public school in very popular high school.
Yeah,
so I was in public, never private.
Yeah, I stuck around the Hyde Park area. I went to like Ray School, and then I went to Kenwood. And so, you know, that was it. And then I left town after that. I'd had enough.
Okay.
And now, you know, as a writer, and that's just to let people know that you are a writer. And for those of you who want to look at Jessica's website, she's got a Wix site, and so she's writergirl25.wix.com/Jessica-Cage-author. And that's where you can take a look at her website. And according to your website, you are a paranormal author from Chicago. What, you know, is this an interest that you picked up growing up, or is it something that you kind of grew into? You know, where did that interest come from?
Well, growing up, I had a grandmother who was one of the original book women. She had a wall of books, like total addict. Like she would read a book a day. That's how much my grandmother read. And that's where my love for books came from. I wanted to write. I wanted to get these little stories out of my head. But growing up, my mother was, and still is to this day, a big sci-fi fanatic. And paranormal, anything that's not natural, or as my grandmother say, not of this world, my mother was into. And we would have sci-fi Saturdays where we would just she would come home with like just a bunch of food, pizza and chips and, you know, any, you know, kid's dream, of a meal. And we would turn on the sci-fi movies. She'd had DVDs, or back then VHS, which makes me feel so old. But we had tapes, and, you know, the Sci-Fi Channel was just like still something that was kind of new. So it was just all day long sci-fi, and I mean, from there, I was like, oh my God, this stuff is interesting. I want to create stuff like this, and the stories started spinning in my head at a very young age, and I would start blending the stories I read from my grandmother's books that my mother did not want me to read with, the paranormal, fantasy, sci-fi aspects, and that's my genre now.
I'm kind of interested. Did you ever find out what it was about sci-fi that your mother was so hooked on?
My mother is a dreamer.
Okay, sure.
She believes in something magical is going to happen. So I feel like that's where it starts. But I don't know. I feel like it's the same way for me when I read about vampires or when I write about alien takeovers. It's something that takes me outside of the real world. And I'm like, you can get that when you watch any movie or read any book, but it's so far from reality, you know what I mean? So you really do get to step away from it and kind of detach it from your real life. And I think that's what my mother did when she would, she's a single mom of 3, and as great as she was, that's a tough thing to do. So sometimes it's good to just kind of unload and just kind of step away from what's happening. And I feel like that was like her therapy in a way. She would just kind of sit down and veg out and eat and enjoy and not stress anymore. And some of those moments was like the most relaxed I think I've seen my mother, because she didn't care about what she was wearing or what she was eating. She was just enjoying her time,
Mhm. So at a very young age, you're exposed to all of this. What at that time did you have any particular favorites? Whether it was like a lot of people who I've interviewed said that Star Wars was like an explosive revelation to them or something like that. Did you? Was it because you had such a constant exposure to it you didn't have a favorite, or did you start gravitating toward a certain genre or a certain part of science fiction, horror, or fantasy?
For me, it was the Species and Alien series that I loved the most, and I think it was because it was more focused around the women. I mean, you had these strong women. Yeah, they were aliens. Yeah, they had their issues, but I just I want to be strong. In my young mind, it wasn't, oh, I want to be an alien. It's just I want to be this strong woman who's walking around and destroying people with a kiss and stuff like that. That was cool to me when I was younger. So those really became my go-to movies when it was oh, what are we going to pick? And, we would rotate between me and my 2 little brothers who could pick a movie. And they knew when it was my turn, I was always, hands down going to say Alien or Species, because that's what I really enjoy watching. And those themes of, the female empowerment are in my books, which I guess it took me a while to kind of realize it was there, but I write about characters who they don't start in the Species series. You see her going from this innocent little girl and going through all these stages until she's this beast of a woman. And I feel like that's what I portray when I write. I take you through the stages. You don't just come in and it's this woman who is, strong and powerful and already got it. You kind of have to see her grow into that. And no, she's not the damsel in distress, but she has to figure out how to become, that bad woman that, we all want to be.
and then so you've got kind of this in your mind. You're turned on by the strong woman aspect of storytelling. When did that kind of translate into when you started thinking about doing your own story? Uh-oh, it looks like she fell off the grid here. We're going to have to wait. Hopefully she'll dial in soon. For the rest of you, happy Friday the 13th. I don't know if you believe in that or not believe in that. I stayed out from under all ladders today. Didn't see a black cat all day. I don't know what the other imagery. Oh, didn't break a mirror. Oh, here she comes. Are you back?
Hi, I'm back. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was talking about Friday the 13th. What are the superstitions? Superstitions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any of those?
Yeah.
I mean, is that why your phone went out?
Quite possibly. I don't really give into superstitions. I mean, I live with a black cat, so a lot of people would say that was a bad idea, and I broke a lot of mirrors growing up. But so if any of that stuff is true, I'm in bad shape right now.
Well, if it hasn't gotten you so far, you may escape. You know.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
So anyway, I was asking, you know, when did your love for sci-fi and strong women, horror, fantasy, all of those, translate into you deciding to write your own stories?
I've always been creating stories in my mind. I just happened to be reading another one of my grandmother's books and talking to her. You know, and I think I was at that point in my life where I was the chatty kid. So I would read, and then I would go to my grandmother, and I would start talking about whatever I wrote or read, and then I would spin off into, like, how I would have did the story, or, oh, this, you know, when I read this line, I thought about this, and then I would go off on this, you know, complete tangent about, you know, a story that came to my mind. And I think it was in one of those moments that I realized, like, oh, my God, I'm creating these stories myself. And my grandmother kind of like, you should just go write that down. And I feel like that was her saying, like, you know, leave me alone, give me some peace and quiet. But that was when I really started, and I just went and grabbed a notebook, and I think it was like one of my cousin's school notebook. I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to be writing in it. But I started right then, and I started writing stories and filling little notebooks up, and I had them all over the place, and I would just write. And it was for me. You know, the only person who read my stuff until I think almost high school was my grandmother. I didn't,
Okay.
You know, I had one cousin when I was in 8th grade that read some of my stuff, and that was it.
Nothing for school.
I did young authors every year since first grade, but that was pretty much it. I would, like, in writing, like, I took some high school writing classes, and that was when, you know, the teacher was actually like, you know, this is what you need to be doing. And I started to pursue writing, and then I was told by other people, like, that's not really a good thing for you to do, like, for your future. And I was very just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll go to school for business. So, you know, the whole circle comes back, and I'm like, I should have just went with my passion in the beginning, you know. So here I am now, finally doing that.
Well, I'm looking at. I looked at your website. I think I looked at Amazon too. But so far, you've knocked out 4 books.
Currently, I have 13 published.
Oh, you know what? I didn't hit that arrow.
Oh, yeah.
Look at all of that. Look at all of that. For those of you who are listening online now, the link to her website is up there. Jarvis put it in, writergirl25.wix.com/Jessica-Cage-author. And so, about when did you take what you had written down in those notebooks and turn it into a story, or did you actually just start writing something? You know, tell us a little bit about the first published work that you did. What was the journey?
The first published work was something I wrote while I was pregnant. I had a high-risk pregnancy, which meant staying in the bed for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And during that time, this is when I kind of started reflecting about life choices and decisions in my future, because, of course, I'm growing this life inside of me, and these are the type of things you think of. I have to provide for this child. I have to give him motivation and encouragement, and how am I going to do that? And the question that kept coming to my mind was, how am I going to teach my son that, you have to follow your dreams. You have to do what makes you happy. You can't give up on yourself I feel like that's what I did. I feel like somebody told me that, writing wasn't going to be the thing for me. And I just was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do what makes me money, not what makes me happy. And that's just not what I wanted for my son. And in thinking of that, I started to write again because it just kind of took me back to being a little kid and not really wanting to deal with reality. And that's what I would do when things got tough, and I was an emotional kid. So whenever I got really emotional, I would just start writing. And I started writing when I was, a month and a half into my pregnancy, and I just kept writing it. And I never really set a goal or anything with it. I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And 3 months after I gave birth, I started a program called Jobs for Youth. And I shared the work with one of the mentors there. And she encouraged me to, you did this for a reason. You want to do something to encourage your son. You need to do this. And I just started looking into self-publishing. I never even thought about going the traditional route just because that's the kind of person I am. I want to get into it and learn and do it and grow with the process. So, sure. And now thinking back, I feel like I did it for my son, but I did it a lot more for me, I needed that. I needed to be able to get up and say, this is what I did, and I'm finally sharing all these stories in my head with everyone else.
And like when you did the first one, in your process, was it kind of singular? Did you have someone else who was kind of looking after what you were writing after you wrote it? Because even if you are bedridden because of a medical condition, there's still a process that you go through. Can you describe yours a little bit for everybody?
I was very naive with the process of writing. I wrote it all myself. I let a friend look at it, and then I published it. And I say I kind of regret that move, but at the same time, I'm happy that I did it that way because that's how I met my editor. She was one of the people who picked that first book up, and she came to me and she was like, hey, I love your story. I love your style, but it needs some work. And, it was hard to hear that, but it was necessary. It was very necessary to have somebody be real with me because you get a lot of people, oh, God, this is great. And then they walk away and you're like, oh, okay, yay. But nobody was really being real with me, at that point and saying, this is awesome, but you need to do more because then I would have kept, putting out work that was flawed. So we started working and we still work together to this day. So.
Well,
and now my process is, so many tiers to it before anything hits the public eye.
Right. And out of these books that you've written, what's the title of the first one that you did?
The first one is called Revitalized. It's the first of a series. It's called the High Arc series. It's about Alexa, who is a girl who finds out that she is next in line to be the queen of an alien race of vampires.
It sounds interesting. It's not like, and when I look at the synopsis here, 2 years of seclusion has a way of changing you. Well, sure it does, yeah. And what drew you to write, a vampire genre book from the beginning?
It was when I wrote that book. It was around the time where vampires was, really big, and everybody was putting out their different versions of the vampire. And to me, I think in every other book that I've read so far, vampires were just like this mutation, or say evolvement of the human race.
Right.
You know,
An evolution, an offshoot or something of regular humans.
Right. For me, I didn't see it that way. And this kind of brings me back to the days of watching about aliens with my mother. In this book, aliens, vampires are aliens who come here from another, world, universe, because of a darkness that takes over their home. And their queen, who is the hierarch, uses her power to bring them here. And, when Alexa finds out that she's the queen, they find out that darkness is now here, and you have to protect us. She coming into this not knowing that, vampires or aliens or any of this exists. And they're like, okay, not only are you our queen, but there's this big evil thing coming that we've been running from for thousands of years, and now it's your turn to save us from it. So.
And you said this at the beginning because it was when vampires were. I mean, do you see yourself as a kind of a commercial writer? Where what you do is you want to put together stories and craft tales and series that at least follow familiar memes, so other people, when they read them, at least part of it is familiar ground, and you don't have to explain a whole new wide world or universe in order to get people to understand what you're writing, or are these really coming forth from your mind as whole ideas, or maybe it's both? I don't know.
I don't know if I can say that I'm commercial now. I think back then, with writing that story, is that was what I was into at that time, so
Sure.
It came to me. I think now I am more. I write what makes me happy. I write what feels right to me. Not to say that that didn't, because at the time that's what made me happy. I was reading about vampires, and I kept saying, well, why is it in every book this is how vampires are looking? This is what they are. To me, it wasn't that, so that's why I wrote it. And I feel like as long as I stay true to myself, regardless if it, if it gives people, a comfortable place to be or not, I think this is what makes me happy, and this is the story I want to share.
Okay. All right. So that's the first one. What other kinds of plots did you put together? Were they more sci-fi? Were they more horror, fantasy? What's kind of like your mix right now?
Right now, I am more fantasy.
Okay.
And a lot of mythology is coming up in my current works, dealing with, sirens and griffins and things of that nature. The only book that I can say have real themes of horror is the Last Stop series, which is about a girl named Josephine she has what they call sight, and she sees the spirits of people who have passed, and she has to usher them into the afterlife. And there are some moments in that book that I think people might be a little squeamish about, and that might scare them. But I feel like that's the only real horror I can say. And the problem that I have when people ask me about genres and everything is that, this book is paranormal. It has paranormal elements, but it's more character driven. I think I focus a lot more on the characters themselves than the fact that they're vampires, or that, obviously you're going to see that because that's what they are. But the storylines, I think, focus much more on the characters themselves. So it's very hard for me to kind of push them into one, niche.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Plus, I think writers also evolve. If they write long enough, I think. Well, I see two different kinds of writers. I look at writers from the golden age of science fiction, because that's when I got interested in science fiction, way back before most of the people who are listening to this were born. And the thing is that I liked series because they kept putting familiar characters in new situations, but I also liked watching someone start something new to see how they twist it. Like Asimov had his robots and his Foundation series, and Robert Heinlein had his his fascists and I don't want to say sex maniacs. Let's just say socially liberated series. And so people pick different kinds of things to pivot to when they write. So I was curious about that. It sounds to me like you're very, very comfortable kind of in the fantasy and horror world, and having grown up with so much science fiction, I'm wondering, have you written anything that you might consider more strongly science fiction or even hard sci-fi or something along that line?
I haven't published anything like that. I am currently working. I made a vague announcement on my social media a few months back that I will be working on a project that's going to take me about 2 to 3 years to complete. And it's strongly sci-fi, and I think I'm definitely, of course, going to be publishing it, but all of my other, super alien or super sci-fi stuff I've never published, just because I guess I didn't feel as confident in it as I did my other work. And I mean, every writer has that folder on their computer or that notebook on their, shelf that's filled with all these different storylines that just didn't go anywhere. And the second series that I planned to publish was about elementals, and it was highly sci-fi, but I don't know, I feel like it just wasn't really there for me, and I love the storyline, and I kept it, and I still to this day will go back to it and reread those first few chapters that I wrote. And it's like one of these days, I know, like, I'm going to pick this up and I'm just going to be like, yes, this is it. Because I really love the idea and the concept of the story. But I feel like at that point, I wasn't in a place to really write it the way it should be. And I'm very, I like to be connected to my stories. Everyone always asks, what's your process? How do you do it? And I am the type that I need to feel it. I need to be able to close my eyes and see it, and I need to be in the story. I can't plot on paper. I can't, at least not in the beginning. Like when it goes back to doing like revisions and stuff like that, of course you have to do some tidying up. But when I'm writing that first draft, I like to feel like a kid just watching a movie, or, what, like I'm just sitting there and I'm watching it happening. I don't want to plot it out. And that story, when I first started writing it, it was just happening. It was happening. And I don't know what happened in my world or, with the story, but it just kind of stopped. And now every time I pick it up and I read it, I'm like, I just really want to write this story, and it's just not quite there for me yet. So I had to move on, But sci-fi is just, like I said, it's from when I still write little short stories that I keep to myself. And that's just because it's something I like, but I feel like that's not my strongest work, so I don't want to put it out for the world to see quite yet.
Is writing cathartic for you?
It is, absolutely. When I don't feel like I'm under a deadline or anything, yes. At the end of the day, and I still love to write with pen and paper. That to me is like the best thing. I mean, I love my computer, I love my tablet, but to pick up a notebook and a pen and just sit with a glass of wine and maybe a candle, and that is like the best thing for me. That's when I'm really in my zone, and I feel just kind of at one with like the world. Kind of be corny, but yeah, I've always loved to write, and I feel like because it was that for me when I was younger, it still is today.
So let's talk a little bit about process, because obviously you have a method that works real well for you, and I admire you for being able to do it in a notebook, to write in a notebook. I can't do that anymore. I don't know if it's because I'm too old, or I think part of it is, for me, if I write it down like that and then I have to go and enter it into the computer, then I'm doing double work. I I don't know, but that's just me. I mean, obviously, everybody has their own process. But when you're creating a story, or when you have an idea for a story, where do you start? Do you start with creating your putting together your creative universe first, or and I'm talking about like at the beginning of a series. Obviously, if you're in the second, third, fourth volume of a series, you've already got the universe created. But or do you go ahead and do you kind of formulate a character in your mind and then think about, then you think about how that character is going to do whatever they're going to do up against the world they live in?
When I first start out with the character, I just see the character. I'm very visual. So, for instance, with my Siren series, I happen to be having a conversation with a couple of the authors about how there weren't a lot of stories about mermaids, and I really loved Little Mermaid growing up. Like, that was one of my favorite, shows, whatever. And I come home, and I'm just like, oh, that was an interesting conversation. And as I'm laying down, I get this vision in my head, and I'm like, this is nice. This is, a mermaid, but it just felt like, Little Mermaid all grown up. And I went to sleep, and when I woke up the next morning, I had this character just kind of in my head, like, hey, I'm here, write me, And that's how it starts. That's how it always starts. It always starts with, like, an image, and then it goes from there. I've been on the trains, and I wrote a blog about this a while ago, not that long, a couple weeks ago, about how when I'm on the train, I'm inspired because I'll get, like, a flicker in the corner of my eye of something. I'm like, oh, what was that? And then the whole story comes to mind, Not saying that story is going to be one that gets written, but that's how I get a spark of inspiration, I never try to, think up a character. I like for my characters to come to me. I like to be surprised and then see where it goes. And if it goes somewhere, awesome. If not, okay, there's another few pages in a notebook on my shelf, that I can go back to, however long from now and enjoy for myself.
Yeah, and given your process, I mean, how many notebooks are we talking about sitting on that shelf there?
Okay, well, my mom has a ton of notebooks in her attic, and I've been in this apartment for 2 years, and there's already about 13 or 14. I still do it, and I have a bin under my bed full of notebooks with random thoughts and random ideas in it. It's just something I do. I carry one in my bag everywhere I go, just in case, or I'll make notes on my phone and come home and write them in my notebook. My friends, I'm always like, oh, man, you said that. I'll type it on my phone and save it for later so that I can put it in my notebook because this might be a great story. And it's been what I've done. And when I was younger, the funny thing is I used to put dollars at the end of every, short story I wrote. And I would write a story, and when I felt like it was over, I would put $1 on the page, close the notebook. I forgot that this was something that I used to do. And a couple years before I moved out of my mom's apartment, I was just going through things, and I was like, okay, let me, clear up some of the clutter because my mom's starting to get upset because there's boxes and boxes of my stuff all over the place. And I started going through these notebooks, and I'm reading one of the stories, and I get to the last page, and there's $1 there. And I'm like, oh, my God, there's $1. And I keep going, and there's $1. And I keep going, there's $1. And I'm like, I completely forgot that this was something that I did. And it was like I guess it was my system of saving my money and rewarding myself for writing that story. And I had notebooks filled with short stories and dollars. And I was very happy because I was a teenager at the time, and I was kind of broke because my mom was like, if you don't clean up this mess, I'm not giving you no more money. And I'm like, ha-ha, now I have all this money. And I read all these awesome stories that I, wrote as a kid. So.
No. Oh, no, you didn't stop there without telling us how many dollars you had.
I don't want to tell that. I was very proud of my $123.
There you go. There you go. See, that lets people know exactly what your output was. That's pretty cool, though, because, for you, first of all, to do that, I think that's creative. And then to forget you did it, and then to come back to it, that had to be kind of cool for you to realize that, oh, that was my process, you know?
Yes. Yes. I was an odd little kid, I guess, but I benefited from it.
Yeah, but that's $120. I mean, still as a kid. I mean, you're talking about a teenager, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one at a time, 120 some odd times, you finish something. But now you mentioned that when you go back, some of them were not such great stories, but at least you were keeping track of the ideas you had. And I think a lot of people don't do that. You know, every now and then I'll think of something that I think is really brilliant, and I won't be in a place where I can write it down, like driving. You know, I've already run over my quota of nuns standing in the middle of the street because I'm not paying attention. So I can't do that anymore. So I have to keep both hands on the wheel and quit, trying to write things down. But, I mean, I wonder how much more productive I would have been had I been as disciplined as you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
that is discipline. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I sometimes look back and I think like where that started. And one of my uncles, when I was younger, he told me to always keep a notebook with me. And this was not for writing down my little short stories. It was because he said it was something that you're supposed to do as a lady, so you can write down notes and you can, I didn't buy into that part of it. But
as a lady,
you can write down as a lady. I was supposed to keep a pen and a notebook in my, a little notepad in my bag at all times. And I didn't really buy into it for the ladies' part. I'm like, anybody need a note, they should have a pen and paper with them. Like, but I was like, I can keep that with me and I can write my stories, and that's where it started. And I'm like, I could thank him for that, but I probably won't.
That's and you know what? I'm sitting here wondering, okay, why would a lady do that? And I'm sure there probably would have been a story behind that had you asked him. And so anyway, you've got these probably, you think you're in the hundreds now of notebooks, at least between you and your mother's place?
I'm sure. I know quite a few of them. When we did move further south, they got destroyed and thrown out because one of my cousins decided what we did and didn't need, along with I used to be a mathlete when I was younger, so there were a lot of awards that I won, and he decided I didn't need. Just a lot of stuff that I guess he felt like he didn't want to move, so he didn't move it. And I was devastated when I got to the new, and I started unpacking. I'm like, where's my awards, and where's this, and where's that? And it was all gone. So I think over the time, I've filled up, I'm sure, hundreds of little notepads and books. And, my mom would keep me in supply of different notebooks. She worked in a medical office. She was a medical assistant. And, they get all types of free notepads and stuff.
Yeah, little pads.
Logos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she just bring them home to me.
That by itself just represents a lot of creativity and a certain amount of discipline that I'm sure a lot of people don't have, and maybe some, and that some do. So nowadays, okay, so you're riding on the train, you're thinking about a mermaid, you grab your notebook, and then if the idea looks like it's one that germinates a good story out of you, take us through what's the next step in your process. Do you kind of think about the other characters? Do you put together the background, where the character's going to, I mean, obviously a mermaid's probably going to live somewhere near some water. But when you flesh something out, I'm guessing, what kind of process do you have? Do you think in terms of, okay, well, let me give you an example. For me, most of my writing takes place at least in the present or the near future. So I take elements of what really exists in our country, in our world, and then kind of build on that. So it's a little bit easier than what most people do when they have to create something out of whole cloth. How does your process work? Are you more likely to create something completely different than what we experience today as people? Or do you borrow elements? And if you do borrow elements, where do you borrow them from?
All of my work to date that is published is, in modern times.
Okay.
And they are all, at some point in every story, they're in Chicago. And I don't intend for it to be that way. It just always kind of happens. And that's home for me. So I don't know. But I like to listen to the story itself, like as it builds. I like to write it very organically, and I'll marinate on the story. I don't do too much structuring when I write that first draft. I just kind of let it flow out. And if it keeps flowing, then I know, okay, this is something that I want to continue doing. And when I get to about 25,000 words or so, that's when I feel like, okay, now I'm really starting to think about different characters and how they fit, but I'm still letting that story flow naturally. Whenever I try to force something to happen, or try to sit down and outline and say this is what's going to happen, at least for like the first book in the series. If it's a series book and it's the first book, I cannot, structure it like that on that first draft. Everyone knows like the first draft for me is a skeleton. It's not a full story. My first draft usually comes to about 35,000 words. And that's because I'm basically in my head watching it as maybe like you would watch a movie. You know what I mean? And that's just how I get that story out initially. And then I kind of take a step back and kind of marinate on what has come out from that process. And then I start to go back into it and, okay, this is my main character, but what is she really about, or what is he really, like, what's really driving him, and then I dig in at it. And I structure the story based on what I feel that character to be, or, their true intentions throughout the story. So like with Siren's Call, which is about the siren, it started, like I said, very randomly. When I wrote that first draft and I went back, the beginning doesn't make any sense. Take that out and fix this stuff and I add to it and I take away, and people say like my way is kind of chaotic. A lot of people I don't think could do it the way I do. A lot of people couldn't write a full slab of work and then go back and chop it up and throw this out and pull it back together. But that's just how I work. When I try to do, people have given me this is how I outline, or this is how I plot, and this is how I do this. It doesn't work for me because it just makes the story feel too inorganic. And I feel like it becomes, I don't want people to read my stuff and be like, oh, I knew where she was going with that, or, you know what I mean? And I feel like when you plot, you kind of take away that surprise element. You take away, that gotcha moment, you know what I mean? Because I want to feel when I write it like, oh, my God, I cannot believe that. And if I don't feel that, then I don't publish it. I don't let it. I just put it in a notebook and put it away because now it's too predictable. People can tell what's going to happen because you sat here and you plotted it out. And when you plot, to me, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but to me, plotting is, structuring it, and you kind of let what you've already seen and what you've already read and what you've experienced kind of take over a little bit. At least that's how it is for me. So to kind of just let it flow for me as is and, see where it's going and see what these characters are doing, and then go back and say, okay, this is nice, but people have to be able to read it and understand it and not be like, what is she doing? So now I have the main message, and I have this character's true perspective down, and I just go back and clean it up and make it so that when people read it, they're not reading the ramblings of my mind. They can read it and understand it and grammatically correct. And sometimes my editor has to.
There's purpose. You have a beginning, a middle, and end. You've got all of the structure for the story.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's just crazy talk compared to me. No, I'm just saying, and no, I'm kidding about the crazy talk part because, as a writer for me, I always have to figure out what the ending is going to be because I want a very, very strong ending to every story because it's the one thing that people always remember. It's like going to a movie. What do people most remember? They remember some of the action, but they definitely remember the ending. So for me, my neuroses are centered around making sure that the story ends up either ironic or unexpected or misdirected. I misdirected them away from what I really was doing until the very last second, and then they say bad words about me. I'm like, oh, that, whatever. And so,
yes.
No. And see, this is the beauty of creativity, because everybody comes at it from a way that works best for them, especially people who repeat. People who will write more than one thing. Sometimes somebody will write one thing, they figure, well, screw this, I don't want to do it anymore, or I don't have any more stories in me. But for people who do this a lot, they have to develop a kind of their own path to how to get from A to B, or from start to end. And yours is completely different from mine, but obviously yours is working for you. And I'm not making a judgment at all, because I'm well aware that people do things differently. And then there's people out there who use a lot of these writing tools in order to kind of keep them centered and keep them, in a groove. You know what I mean? Like what's one someone just talked about? Oh, Scrivener, or other kinds of tools, which I don't find they don't help me at all. But like I said, everybody's process. I've heard so many different ways that people put together their stories for doing novels, for short stories, and things like that. That it's just fascinating to me.
Yes.
And so when you're in the middle of it, are you pretty excited about where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, if I don't feel the excitement, I stop writing. It's very, and it's frustrating for my readers. It's frustrating for my followers, because I have to be in that story. I'm very, hippie-like, I guess, like the way I talk about my work. Like, I have to feel it. It has to be flowing through me. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm not writing it. So, like you said, Scrivener and all those other programs, they're nice, but they don't work for me, because I can put all this in your program, but if that is not in me, I'm not going to work on it. It's a waste. And I'm very old school when I edit. I will type it all up. Like, I write it in my notebook, and my first set of revisions is when I'm typing it, because when I'm typing it is when I'm really starting to go through and read what I wrote and fix it to where I feel, these things need to be here, and then I print it. I print it like old school, and I get my red pen, and I start to go through it and make my notes and edit it with my pen. And a lot of my author pals will say, your process is like the worst. This is tiring. How are you doing this? And it's like, but it's my process. I want to feel the work. I want to hold it in my hand, and I want to see it, and I want to, it's nice when you in Google Docs or whatever, and you can see the strike through, but I actually want to write that strike through. I want to scribble all over it and, take out my aggression on that paragraph. How dare this paragraph look like this? You know what I mean? So I enjoy that part, and I've tried to do the editing on screen, and it's I guess it's convenient and to save some trees, but it's just not for me.
No, I get that, and like my editor, the one who's done most of my editing, she has to edit on paper, which, and since she's not listening, makes me mad as a you-know-what, because it's like, oh, man, now I got to type this. I have to go and do all these corrections. It would be nice if she did it in, on out of a file or something. But I will say this, though. Her editing has made me a better writer, because I understand structure better. And she even gave me a gift. She gave me the University of Chicago Manual of Style. That's like I'm telling you, it's like the writer's Bible. And if I ever have a question, and I don't really question very much, I leave it all up to her. But I do look up stuff in that, because I'm far from perfect. I'm so far from perfect that if anybody looked at my real first drafts, they go, "Please, you William, you're not seriously thinking to put this out there." So I learn something every time she edits, but I can't do it the way you guys do it because it offends my sensibilities about doing double work. And I know how that sounds, but that's my process. But yours is obviously is working for you, you know?
Yeah. I like you said, everyone has their process. And I think I grew up with my Aunt Yvette, who I love, and she used to edit my papers for school, and that's how she edited. She was like, print it out and bring it to me. And my mom used to talk about how brutal she was. She's so brutal. She's gonna make your page bleed, and my mom hated it. She hated it. But for me, that was like, yes, like bleed, like let that page bleed so I can learn and I can, and I can see it changing. And for my first book, I still have all of the stages. I have the handwritten notebook. I have the first draft printout that I typed up, and it's still bleeding to this day. And like I have all of the stages. And that first book I republished, so I have the original publication, and then I have the current one. And it's just like seeing it and seeing the change of it physically, not just on a screen, is just, it's the best thing. And I always try to take my papers when I'm done and recycle them now. Everything except the first one. But all of those printout drafts, I take them and I recycle them because I do, I have a kid and I don't want to be like the problem with the world. And I buy recycled, printer paper.
Well, of course, yeah. And right in the chat room, my buddy from Kenya there is accusing me of being a tree killer. So, yeah, no, I get that. I do the same thing. I cross-cut, shred everything, and then I recycle that, because I don't want anybody knowing how bad my drafts were. But I'm like you, I do keep the first draft. I keep everything digitally, too, because I'm just assuming that the Smithsonian is going to be calling me one of these days and want some of that
one day.
stuff. Yeah, I even kept the computer that I wrote my first 3 books on because I know they're going to want to put that in the Smithsonian or someplace, or the Museum of Science and Industry. Because
part of history.
Once I get that Pulitzer, they're going to go, well, William, what was your process? Well, here you go. I had a Windows XP computer, and I wrote 750,000 words on it. So, but and that's half a joke, and it's not a joke, because you know what? If they called me up and said that they wanted it, I would be the happiest. Oh, that might. First of all, my ego is large anyway, which is why I have to live in such a large apartment building. But if they said that to me, there'd be, you all couldn't say jack to me after that. Of course, it has not happened, and I'm still at least reasonably humble. But no, and you know what? The other thing is, there are times when I will go back and I'll look at the first draft of the first book just to see, hopefully, how I have grown as a writer. You know what I mean? I mean, you've done how many books now?
13.
13 books. And we're doing this on Friday the 13th, so I'll try not to forget that.
Yes.
So when you look at from the first book, that's right. It is a full moon tonight, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So
I'm in my zone right now, look.
Are you really? Are we taking you away from some valuable writing time?
Oh, no. I'll be up tonight with my wine and my laptop,
All right, okay.
Stuff, I'm sure.
And since you live in Chicago, I always tell people I interview, if you come to Chicago, I'll take you to lunch. But I would love to, one of these days run into you, maybe sit down, talk about process and things like that off the air, and then that way we could talk about stuff that we can't talk about on the air, and I could use my different language. But seriously, when I think about you've got 13 books out there. When you look at the first one, do you see how you were and that you may have evolved into a better author, a better writer from when you first started out?
Oh, definitely. That first book was me really just trying to hear the voice and, the message that I wanted to put across. And it wasn't until about 2 years after that book came out that I realized, like I said, the connection with my childhood and watching those particular films. And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm writing about these 5 females who are going through this stage, and they're all at different stages of becoming these women that they want to be. And that's exactly where I was in my life when I wrote the book, And I think that really, to this day, like when I look back at that, I feel like I've grown so much, and by recognizing that I was at a point where I needed to grow and I needed to do more reflection, and I started to, go to seminars and, just take online courses to help me better myself and really kind of get across what I want to say more efficiently. And to,
Sure.
like you said, to kind of to get my voice, I don't want to sound like just another writer. I want people to pick up my stuff and say, okay, this is something that Jessica wrote. And one of my friends recently was like, girl, I read your work, and it's like I'm sitting in a room and I'm talking to you. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. Like, I want people to feel like, okay, this is Jessica's work,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, I would say product of, a service of the blacksci-fi.com website. Tell your friends to check it out. There's a literal ton of creative work there, and it's original work, and it's work that you're not going to see anyplace else. So log on and take a look at it. This is the, for those who jumped in late, obviously this is the Friday the 13th, May 13th, 2016 edition, and we're talking to author Jessica Cage. So anyway, people are, they're asking online, you've got 13 books out there. What, when you look at raising your voice above the background noise, which essentially is just marketing, what kinds of tools, what kinds of strategies have you used so that people can find you and then go, oh, yes, I read Jessica Cage before, this is definitely her, this is her voice, or, oh, I like her, so I want to read more about her. What are you doing to try to get, new people to discover you?
Currently, I am using a lot more of the available promotion sites that cater to people, genre specific, and that's really been working for me. Because there are sites where you can put your book up and it just goes into a queue with 1,000 other random books and no one ever finds you. And that was one of those mistakes that I made. I wouldn't call it a mistake, but it was a misguided step when I first started. I didn't, look into marketing. And so, like I said, it wasn't until 2 years after publishing that first book that I really started to play the role of author. And I often say, picking up a pen and writing something makes you a writer. But for me, I wasn't an author until I started looking at this as a business, until I started actually trying to increase my platform and, reach more readers. I feel like once you, because it's so easy to publish a book right now, anybody can publish a book. You just put some words on the screen and upload it to Kindle, and it's there,
That's true.
So I feel like everybody's a writer. Everybody's a writer. But the authors are the ones who, promoting and going to events. And when it becomes something that's more than just putting words on a screen or a piece of paper, and you're actually reaching readers and talking to them and getting one-on-one, that's when I feel like an author, As far as marketing, I have been becoming more a part of the communities that I feel cater to the people who would like to read my stuff. When I first started doing this, I was at a lot of romance conventions, and it's like, why am I here? Like, I love the people, the other authors. Oh, my God, they're amazing, but I don't fit into this world. People walk right past my table because they're like, ooh, vampires or, ooh, ghosts. No, and they keep walking. So I feel like it's good to do your research and find out where your readers are, who's interested in what you have, the demographic of, if I put this picture up in a Facebook ad, who should I select to see it? You know what I mean? It's very important to go out and get into forums. And as much as we all kind of loathe social media, it's very important right now. You have to get out there and get into the world of your reader. And a lot of my readers are at home on their computer right now. You know what I mean? And that's how I'm reaching them. So, targeting like specific promo sites that like ilovevampirenovels.com. That is a very specific demographic, that it's telling you these are readers who love vampire novels. Like, why am I not putting my stuff on this book, on this site? So it's
right.
like I really have had to kind of zone in and calm down with I'm going to sign up for everything and really start thinking, is this going to benefit me in the long run? Am I going to meet readers who really want to hear what I have to say? And I think taking the time to do the research is very important. Like, regardless of what you're doing, I feel like any endeavor, you need to stop and research. And I would have said if I could talk to myself before I hit publish, I would say, hey, wait about a year, do some research, get out there, let your name be known, raise your hand in a couple of groups, and then hit published. But that's not how I did it. I learned after that. But I'm glad I took the time to learn, because a lot of people, they publish a first book and they sell 10 books in a year and they say, forget this, I am done. And I literally sold like 10 books that first year. That was it, because I had no idea what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Now are all your books electronic books, ebooks? Or do you
I have
also
all
sell
of them ebooks, and I have paperback because I am a paperback lover. Because, with my grandmother, and she wants a copy of every book that I publish. So they have to be available. And I had a couple of short stories that I posted on my blog a while ago. She made me print them out and give them to her, because she's like, I'm not reading it on the screen. Print it out and give it to me so I can read it. So everything has to be something. No, had I given them to my auntie, she probably would have.
She would have marked them up. Okay, just wanted to.
She would have sent it back to me in the mail. She's in North Carolina now. She would have marked it up, printed, sent it right on back to me, like, all right, do this and send it back so I can read it again.
And for you, well, somebody in here wants to know how you market with social media. Well, I think that's pretty straightforward. I could be wrong. But, have you used Facebook ads in particular or not? I don't know if I heard that.
I used to use Facebook ads when they were a lot simpler. They're a lot more complicated now, and I haven't really put the effort towards learning their new system, because they have rules and regulations about what can and can't, and you get denied, and you have to and they have to approve your ad. It can't be too many words on the picture or whatever the case is. In the past, Facebook ads really helped my sales. I used to do this thing where I would have a bunch of authors dump their links on the ad, and then I would and then I would hit promote, and it would be like, oh, these are all free books, promote, and I would promote it for $10, and everybody would get so many, downloads, because it was easier then. Facebook algorithms are so different now. You're not getting as much of a reach. So I try to emphasize when I talk to people who ask me about, promotions and everything like that, don't rely heavily on Facebook. Facebook is but one of these, countless platforms. That many
platforms. Yeah.
So many. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's like Facebook is the world, but it really isn't. Twitter is very good for getting followers, like, true to your work. As long as you're not going out and paying for Twitter followers, you'll naturally find the people, if you hashtag correctly, who are interested in your work. Instagram is really good. You know what I mean? I feel like they are very specific, but I have so much more feedback on my Instagram pictures, as opposed to, Twitter. As somebody said, to look at Facebook ads again. The ads, like, I never boosted my page.
Right.
I just would, promote the ad itself, the post itself. I've never boosted my page. I'm definitely, obviously, going to take the time to get into Facebook ads again. But when I went in there, I was like, oh, my God, this is crazy. I don't like when Facebook changes stuff. I don't think I'm the only person who says that. When I went from having like 5,000 people see a post to like 10, it was like, what? Come on.
Well, here's the thing. Remember, people often forget that social media is designed to enrich the people who own the site.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, as an adjunct, you can certainly get your name out there to a certain number of people, but that's not the primary purpose of it. It's a money making endeavor for the people who own the site. So I have committed myself, I think, this fourth quarter for the silly season, for the Christmas season. I'm probably going to spend, maybe just under $20,000 for advertising, and I'm going to advertise in 3 places. I've decided what's going to work for me, because I want my dollars to be hyper cost effective. I mean, I want them to be so targeted. I want them to go exactly where they're going to give me the most bang for the buck. And having said that, I fully realize that there are a whole lot of people out there who can't spend at least that kind of money on advertising. And so that's not going to work for them. But for me, if I have the good fortune to be able to do that, then what better place to advertise? And you have to be smart about putting your ad together in the New York Times book section. I mean, that's international right there. That's international. And you get a class of people who buy anything that's advertised in the New York Times book section. So there's a certain amount of return that you can count on. But up until then, I'm doing a few of the minor things that you have. I'm not on Facebook as me because it's too easy for the police to find you, but I've gotten some pretty good. Look, the reason why I do this Friday night show is I got this ankle bracelet on, and I can't get that far from the home. But seriously, Twitter has worked out well for me. Even, and I'm surprised at it. I don't have that many followers, but you are absolutely right about hashtagging. I did a couple posts and hashtag various science fiction hashtags, some black sci-fi, some published sci-fi books, some very specific hashtags, and actually could see responses, people who were at least interested in what I did. So being smart about social media does help. And sometimes the price is just too perfect, Either a friend of mine, James, he spent like $10 on a Facebook ad, and he got a ridiculous number of people at least looked at him. And that's really what you want to do. You want to raise your visibility and hopefully have people who have an affinity for what you do go, oh, this looks interesting, let me give it a try. And then once they give it a try, if you're a good author, you could probably figure you're going to get maybe about at least 20%, 25% people hooked immediately on you as a person, and almost not to the fanatic level, but almost to the fanatic level. So that's not a bad way to go for a small amount of money. But again, the challenge, I don't want to minimize the challenge. The challenge is difficult. Trying to do this to get your name, to get some notice above the background noise, because like you said, anybody can publish a book, is not the easiest thing in the world. So you have to be clever at it. What have you learned most from what you've done in social media? What are the things that you would say, okay, this absolutely made sense. This made sense at the beginning, but it didn't do me a damn bit of good. What have you learned in having to put together your own marketing like that?
I've learned that connecting with readers in my own group is very beneficial. Like, I do have a group on Facebook it's the Cage Readers, because my hashtag that goes with all of my stuff is Cage Fantasies. Play on my last name, obviously. And that group, you get so much positive feedback. It gives you a way to not only connect with the people who really follow your work, but those people then will go out and promote you and tell people, and it makes you relatable. It makes you someone that they can just jump in and, talk to. The thing is, like, when I first started, I was jumping into all these random groups, and I was, doing those like for like things, and then you end up with 5,000 likes, and you've liked 5,000 pages, and it seemed like in the beginning, like, this is ridiculous, you know what I mean? But I feel like that, like you said, it's about visibility, and that gave me traction, and for whatever reason, I stopped doing it. At some point, I stopped being that really big social butterfly when it came to, the platform. And that was a really hard thing for me to accept, that I made a mistake in falling back from that scene, because it's so easy to be forgotten now. The attention span is very short. So I gained a bit of traction, and then I kind of slacked off, and it's like, oh, now I have to start all over again. You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned from the beginning to now, is to just have consistency with what I'm doing. Maybe not go so, like, I was always in this, 24/7 social media, because it was tiring. Like, that's a full-time job, just doing your social media outreach, commenting and messaging back and forth, and then people get upset with you because you're not messaging them back quickly enough. And it's like, this is tiring. So I had to pull it back to a point where, yes, I'm still social. Yes, I'm still in touch with everybody. But I am focusing like a larger part of my attention on advertising, promoting, and being visible without having to be at my computer. You know what I mean? Like, I want my name to still be somewhere without me having to be the one to put it there.
Yeah, and you know what? Somebody mentioned about services that do things for you, that will manage your social media. All of that takes money. And the one thing that I've found about those services is the people who run those services have their own, I would have to say, their own business model. And sometimes what they're selling is the same template or the same cookie cutter marketing plan for everybody, and sometimes that just doesn't work. Someone who marketed for your books would not be the right person to market mine. You know what I mean? You're in the fantasy world, and I'm in more of the hard sci-fi world. And for the most part, there's not a lot of overlap in readers. I mean, if you look at a Venn diagram of your readers and my readers, excuse me, there's probably about a 15% overlap, if that. So that's, you want to find someone who is capable of tailoring a plan for you if you're going to pay someone else to do it. And you're right about social media, taking a lot of time. I mean, that is one of the reasons why I have not put William Hayashi and the Dark Side Trilogy on Facebook. I'm on Facebook in a completely other identity, because it's political. But if I were going to use that as a primary means of marketing, there is a certain amount of time that I would have to devote to it. And I don't know if I'm ready to do that. And I get people telling me all the time, man, why aren't you on Facebook? 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 And I want to go, so when did you stop beating your wife? Because not everything is good for everybody. And that's the other thing. You're going to get advice from everyone on how best to conduct your business, but still, as a published author, you are an entrepreneur, and you are responsible for the marketing for your business, and that's what it is a business. It's not just a book. Having 13 books out, when you look at your body of work, what helps you the most in promoting an entire body of work like that? Are you concentrating on getting someone to read the one and trying to get them hooked so that they look for more of your work, or are you, since they're mostly like supernatural, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got a solid body of work in a single genre. Do you look at marketing Jessica Cage as an author more so than marketing the books that you have individually? Which works? Which is, I mean, how are you looking at your strategy?
Currently, I'm focusing more on the brand because, like I said, I have branded as Cage Fantasies, you know. So I'm building my newsletter listings and, you know, my platform for that. But I still do promotions for singular books because, you know, I feel like it's easier for someone to take a chance on a singular book and get into that and then say, okay, now let me see what this Jessica Cage Fantasies readers, whatever, is all about. You know what I mean? So I still will do a few small promotions, nothing that's going to break the bank because, you know, like you said, this is a business and I can't, you know, I'm not at the $20,000 level.
Neither am I. No. I'm, you know, if I don't get it by maybe August, yeah, I'm looking. I got a foolproof plan for robbing a bank that'll work one time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you do what's effective. Like I have some sites that I'm working with now that really cater to the genre that I write in. So okay. I'm promoting, or will be, there are a few major promotions that are going to kick off at the end of this month and run through August that is going to build my list and my visibility, my brand. You know what I mean? I feel like that is more important for me right now because I do have all these books out there. I do have, you know, this body of work that I want to share, but I really need to connect with more readers. And I found just by being a reader that receiving a newsletter that's personalized, not just a sell ad, you know, I don't want to get 18 emails from you about your next book or whatever, but something that's personalized where it's like a forum, like you can come back to me and, you know, that's what I want to do. I want to continue to, I want to continue to connect with readers. I think that's what it's all about. It's not so much about the sales right now because sales are doing good. You know what I mean? Like, right. Okay, I've done that. I've gotten to a point where I'm happy with, you know, a steady course of my sales. Yes, of course, obviously I want that to increase so that I can give up this day job. But right. It's more important for me to be able to say, I connected with a reader. You know, I recently had an experience where I was at a book signing and a young girl who had actually read my work came up to me and was like, oh, my God, I read the first book, you know, because, you know, they list who's coming to these events. So the girl went and she read the first book, and she was so excited. And she sat down and we talked, and that's what it's for. You know, we talked about how she loves this, you know, genre, and it's so hard for her mom to, like, trust for her to read stuff. So when they read it, and they were very happy, and she wants to be a writer, and then it was so nice to connect with her. And she connected with me through my author page on Facebook. And that's what it is about to me. And I know I can't have that one-on-one conversation with every reader, but I want my newsletter and my outreach and my platform to be like, okay, I'm more about my readers. You know, I want to connect with you guys. I don't want it to be, here's my book, buy it. Okay, I'm going to go write another one, come back. Here's my book, buy it. You know, I really want it to be like a relationship, and that's what I'm focused on building right now.
Okay, and so when you have 50,000 sales of your next book, you're going to have to change that up a little bit. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want 50,000 people knocking on your virtual door going, hey, let me ask you a question.
No. Yes, and you know, I was recently at an event in Houston that was really, you know, great. And I was in one of the offices, and she said that it's hard for her because, you know, she used to be very, you know, one-on-one with her readers, and they don't understand, like, this is in my entire life, you know. Like, right. I can't sit on my computer responding to messages all day. I can't, you know, just be on Facebook, you know, liking pictures and, every notification, getting back to you guys. And she said that's been the hardest thing. And I'm like, I know this is what I'm headed for. You know what I mean? Like, I know that once it becomes a lot more busier, it's hard now. I'll admit, like, it's difficult now, which is why I want to go more towards, like, the blog and the newsletter route instead of, just going into, like, Facebook. I like Facebook. I appreciate it for what it is. But I don't want to be so social on Facebook as far as, like, me personally. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I do want to reach my readers, and I've been trying to focus my work in a way that I can do that without feeling like it's so draining on me, And it's a very delicate balance, I think.
Mhm. And so, that kind of begs the question. Give us an idea about how many hours a week do you spend on marketing? How many hours a week do you think you spend on writing? And then, we can guess the rest of them are spent on, like you said, paying the bills and being a person and being a mom and, all of those different things that you have to be. But when you talk in terms of your entrepreneurial endeavor, I call it loosely the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your time is taken up doing the business of doing business, and then 20% of your time is the actual creativity, doing the things that make you, to create your product. What is it for you?
Well, I write as often as I can, just because it like you said, it's my place of peace. So I will be up at 2:00 in the morning. But I try to do 10 hours of writing a week. 10 hours, because I'm a quick writer. I can, 10 hours a week for me is anywhere between 10 and 15,000 words. So that works for me. And then I'm not always successful. I try to limit my social media time to about 6 to 8 books. 8 hours a week. And that's kind of like an hour a day. And I feel like that gives me enough time to touch base with the people who I need to touch base with, to kind of see what's going on in the book world, you know what I mean, and get out. Because I feel like it's so easy to lose hours upon hours just sitting on social media. So many people wake up and the first thing they do is check what happened on social media while they were asleep, So I really try to limit that. I'm not always successful. I'm not perfect at it. But I started that around the December of last year was when I really was like, I have to be more focused on what I'm doing with my time. I research promotion sites and marketing and all of that now 2 hours every day, where I'm reading, and because I feel like in a way I'm making up for the lost time of those 2 years that I wasn't doing it. But I try for 2 hours every day to either be reading about what someone else is doing, or, and it doesn't even have to be about a promotion site. I have books that I have bought from other authors, and I read what they went through, and it helps me to kind of focus my strategy a bit more. It was like someone mentioned branding in the chat. Branding was a thing that I was very weak on. I was so weak on my brand. And it was about 2 years ago that I was like, I got my hashtag, Cage Fantasies. Somebody was like, you have to come up with a hashtag. And that kicked it off for me. And I just, on one post, put Cage Fantasies, and it just kind of took off. My readers were like, oh, yeah, Cage Fantasies. And they used the hashtag. And then one of my readers was like, yeah, we're the Cage Readers. And I was like, oh, I like that.
That's pretty cool.
I started building the brand from there. And I have the logos and all that, and it's a way to get because I have so many people who are walking around with my T-shirts on, and they send me pictures of them with the Cage Fantasy T-shirt, and it's a thing now, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm really focusing on branding and marketing and just learning how to really, like I said, focus my work and make sure that everything I'm putting into it is going to bring me back. And, everything, you're going to have hits and misses. I promoted on this site one time, and I got 3,000 downloads. Yes, and then you go back with another book and you promote, and it's not quite as successful. You know what I mean? It's a hit or miss. But it's like I want to be putting energy where it needs to be put so that I can benefit from it.
Yeah, see, now I'm thinking about, things that I can do. But everything, and I will be honest with everybody, I'm not as interested in promoting as many people are, at least not yet. I got a ton of other things going on in my life every day. But, I have to think about this, and I've picked my 3 places I'm going to advertise this year. I'm going to advertise in Analog Science Fiction, Asimov Science Fiction Magazine, and the New York Times. And as much as people think print is dead, boy, I'm telling you, there are so many book snobs out there who will buy everything that's advertised in the New York Times book section just because they want to have whatever the New York Times says they should have, because they think of that as an endorsement. So, conservatively, and I am being conservative based upon their sales figures, based upon, the outreach and things like that, there's a pretty good chance that spending that money, that enormous, obscene to me, it's obscene to me, even to me, amount of money could get me 20,000 book sales. Well, that's pretty significant, and so 20,000 book sales certainly justifies spending, $18,000. I get more than $1 a book, but just pumping my numbers up like that also gives me visibility. And that's important too. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. People think that's a cliche, but it's not a cliche. It's an actual truism in business. It's like, look at that. Don't send a Morse code, please. Bite me. The New York Times book section is an international publication. Okay, I agree that eventually newspapers are going to go away. But until all these snobs out there quit buying it, I'm going to use it because I'm like a jiu-jitsu man. I love using people's strengths against them. Anyway, all that aside, but see, again, it's a matter of strategic marketing.
Right.
I do this show. A lot of people know me because I do this show, but I don't sit around talking about, go buy my stuff, or on Twitter. I definitely don't send out anything about the books that I've already published more than maybe once a month, because nobody wants to keep receiving the same ad from somebody. You'd like for them to be a little more creative than that. I did poke Neil deGrasse Tyson, though. I got to poke him because we had an email exchange a couple years ago, and I sent him an inscribed copy of my first book. And then remember just a few weeks ago when the LIGO laboratory confirmed there was such a thing as gravity waves? I tweeted to Neil deGrasse Tyson that LIGO laboratory finally catches up with scientific principles written about in 2001 in Discovery, blah, 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 blah. And so I got a little tweet back from him about that. But, unless you can do something clever, you don't want to be screaming at the people who are your fans the same damn thing all the time. Or at least that's how I feel.
Yes, absolutely. And I, like you said, for me, I don't want to do the kind of like what I said with my newsletter. My newsletter, I don't try to put a ton of links in it. It's like, this is what's going on with me. It's more personal because readers like to be able to relate to the writer. They want to.
And they feel, first of all, they feel a sense of validation for their fandom because you're speaking back to them. And like this show will do for you, if you link to this show, people will get to hear a 2-hour interview of you about you in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. You know what I mean? So yes, that personal touch is very important that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And somebody asked about the increase of sales. I just wanted to go back to that because I recently someone was like, how many book downloads have you had from, the beginning to now? And I stopped tracking that at some point because it got depressing. But I did correlate, when I would do a promotional, when I would do this, event or whatever, did I see an increase, yes or no? But I didn't notate that increase or whatever. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been pulling all these numbers in from all over the place. And at that 2-year point, when I actually started to put in the work and do and be an author, my book sales increased just, I would say, by 3,000 times what I was doing before. And I didn't do a ton. You know what I mean? I didn't put a great amount. It was just me trying at that point and not actually knowing what I was doing, but trying to mimic what I saw and kind of learn and do it and grow as I went. So, like I said, my first year, I sold about 10 to 15 books, across 10 on Amazon and then 5 on Nook. That's it. That first year. And by my third year, I had sold 10,000 books in that year alone. So it's very, I feel like if you take the time, like you said, to focus what you're doing, not just be this person who's pumping out ads and links all the time. And really, you know, it all works. It all works in tandem. You can't just be the person hitting the promo button because you put all the money in there. You might get some downloads, but you're not getting follow backs. You're not getting people coming back for more as much as you would if you put the personal side to it. So I think it's like it's a nice bond. It's a mixture of you know, personal and then, you know, the business side of it. Someone said sell or free downloads. Those were a mixture of sales and free, but the very following year I did no free ads and I sold 6,000 books. So it's kind of a balance. The free downloads help to build if you're a new author like I was at that time, it really helps to build your visibility. You get new, and then I had other books for them to come back for. I think if you have one book, giving it away for free is not a good idea. Because they're not going to, it's good if it's the first in a series of books. I feel like that's a very great strategy, especially if you feel like you have something at the end of that first book that's going to be like, oh, my God, I got to find out what happens next. You know what I mean? You have to make them want to come back for more. Free books are really good to get you up on the ranks, but if you don't have anything to follow back because, okay, you gave away this book for free, but how do you keep your rank up? How do you keep your visibility up if they have nothing else to come back for? You know, it's really good to come back for, you know, for more, but if there's nothing there and I already had everything you had for free, then, you know, what's the point?
Yeah, and again, it does go back to being strategic in your efforts, you know, whether it's spending money, whether it's spending time, how are you, you know, allocating your resources, and are you doing it in a very smart way?
Right. And like now, the first book that I ever wrote is perma free now on Kindle. So anybody who goes to Amazon and all the other sites, that book is free. And it's a tactic. It is. It keeps, because I know like they're gonna read that first book and they're gonna come back, and then there are 3 more that they can come back and buy. You know, because those are not gonna be free. You know what I mean? It's a strategy, and it was something that I did at a time where, you know, I was kind of wavering on stuff, and my sales was kind of starting to decrease. I'm like, I don't like that. So I made this decision to put this book free, and it was a good decision because not only are they downloading that free book, but they're coming back for more, and not just of that series. You know, people, if they like like you said earlier, if they like your work, if they like your voice, then they want to see more, and they want to read more. And it's not, and people, how do you get your book perma-free on Amazon? What you do is you upload it free to other sites, and then all of my readers went to Amazon and reported that it's free on this other site. And Amazon does price matching. Right. So after a while, Amazon is like, okay, well, this book can't be free over there, and we charge a 99 cents for it. And it takes about 3 weeks, and then next thing you know, it's perma-free.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool. You know, you've got 13 books out now. You're probably going to be pretty prolific in the future. About how long does it take you from start to finish to get started on an idea? You know, think of your character, get started on an idea until you actually have the manuscript ready for publication, and it's ready, and it's ready for download. What do you think your work cycle is for that now? Now that you've got a pretty good baseline of 13 books.
It takes me about 4 months on average from start to finish, and I think that the first month is just writing. And I like I said, I'm a pretty fast writer, and as long as I'm feeling connected to the story, it flows. The second month is me doing my own revisions, editing, and everything else. That third month I would say halfway through the second month into the third month, my editor has it. And, this process can go anywhere up to 6 months. It can take as long as it needs to take for that book. But, on average, it takes me about 4 months to get until I feel like I have something that's ready to publish. I don't publish it at month 4, because then you have to get beta readers. You have to send out ARCs, and you have to do all of that stuff. You get people who can go and review your work and give you feedback on it. And it's good to get reader feedback before you hit publish. Because these are the people who enjoy your work.
Yeah.
So
when you talk about, sorry to interrupt, but you talk about being able to write for about 4 weeks. How many words generally are your books?
My books are around 55 to 65,000 words.
Oh, okay.
I like something quick that people can kind of get in and out of. Like I said, I write. What people ask me, what do you write? And I say I write fantasies that give you a quick relief from everyday life. Something that you can get into, you can really enjoy it. It takes you away, and then you can get back to reality.
No, that's great.
And
that's
I think I really like that side.
Go ahead.
No, I've always liked the shorter reads myself. So.
Yeah, and if you can do your beginning, middle, and end, and have a cool story in between, there is nothing wrong with that length at all. That for me, that's a short story. Just so that you know, I don't know how to write short stories yet. I'm getting better at it. And so, well, no, that's I hate to say this, but the first book I wrote was like 330,000 words. And fortunately, I had someone took a third of that out, so it ended up being 220,000 words. But, anywho. So, okay, so let's look down the line. You're fairly prolific. If we look maybe 5 years down the road, do you think you're kind of going to be in the same vein? Are you looking at any changes in the kind of output you do? You mentioned that you're looking at least your first sci-fi story, right?
Yes.
And do you think you're going to be, over the next few years, you're going to be branching out to kind of increase the scope of the genres you write in?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I don't want to stay in one area too long, because then it starts to feel a little like restrictive. Like I said, my books go. I do have one that's not, it's a shorter story, but it's not paranormal, it's not fantasy, and one, in one genre or whatever. It's mystery and it's suspense, and that's what I like. I want to write what I like, and like with the project that's sci-fi, I like sci-fi. I love it. It's a part of who I am. It's how I grew up. So I don't want to put myself in a box. I want to be able to dance and play with all the other things. And I have played with some genres that I had to put back, and that's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? I think that for me, I do want to do the sci-fi. But I really want to get into mystery and suspense, like one of those first publications that I had that was short. But I'm really, I feel like I'm really good at that.
Right.
And I'm having more story. And I'm having more storylines come to me that aren't so fantasy or paranormal. It's just everyday people. So I do see myself kind of transitioning into other realms, which is why I really do want to work on building my platform and spreading my wings, so to speak, so that I can reach more readers and not alienate the ones that I already have, because I think a fear that people have when it comes to switching a genre, or not switching completely. It's not like I'm going to completely walk away from fantasy. I don't think I could ever do that. But to move to another one, you feel like, okay, well, these readers aren't going to want to read this. You know what I mean? And then I'm starting all over. And, so it's like that's why I'm really focusing on building me as a brand now, because I do see these transitions coming for me. And I want to be able to already have that platform to stand on and to reach people who not only like what I do now, but could potentially like what I am planning to do in the future.
Yeah, they'll follow you down a new path.
Right.
Plus, I think we've all seen the movie Misery and what that woman did to James Caan's ankles. You really don't want to piss off your readers, because
no, not at all.
You just never know. I mean, people are crazy enough as it is, and once you reach a certain minor level of celebrity, that is something that you have to kind of have to keep in mind. So I don't know. Anywho, all right. So, and the other thing I was going to ask you, you had mentioned that have you gone to many conventions?
Yeah, I've been to, when I first started off, I started with a romance. It was like a book tour, so a book signing tour. And it was very geared towards the romance reader. And I was out of place. But it was a good experience for me, I think, because it helped me come out of my shell, so that I, could get into the feel of like being in people, and because I want to be in my bubble. I want to write my books and sit in my corner and, give it to you, you read it and go away. That's how I wished it worked, but that's not how it works. So I had to learn that, how to be, personable with readers, and how to have complete strangers come up to me and, and not just be there doing a performance, because people can tell when you're like this, I'm an author, thanks, nice to meet you. Like it really helped me to be more present and less closed off towards other people, especially like random people coming up to a table and they're like, tell me about you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
And so what do you like? Yeah.
Right. But as over the years, I've started to try to, pick events that I feel are best for me, because to go to these events, it's not cheap, especially if it's not in your city. You have to fly, you got to get a hotel, you got to, table fees and everything. So it's like, if I'm going to invest this money into going to an event, it has to be more than just for the experience of it. You know what I mean? I did the experience. Right. Now I have to focus what I'm doing. So like this year, I have the one in Houston was amazing because there were other paranormal authors, there were sci-fi authors. It was a mix. So you had a collective of different genres in one place, and you knew that the readers were going to be diverse. And the readers that were there were much more open to what they were picking up. They were, that's the type of stuff I want to be at. And there's one coming up in August. It's called Once Upon a Book event. It's a signing. Totally fantasy based. Like, it's a grand ball. We all get to dress up like our favorite evil queens and stuff like that. So that's where I'm supposed to be, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to do now. Because being at an event and taking these pictures and being on their social platform, and then the readers are there and they're taking pictures and they're getting to know you, and you have the meet and greets and all that. That people, if you connect with these people and they go and they talk about you, that's another form of getting yourself out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's another way of spreading your name. It's not like, oh, here's another email news blast or ad in the paper. It's personal. And people who go and they tell their friends about you, and, that word of mouth is still one of the strongest forms of getting your name out there, of growing your platform. So going to these events, I do go now with the idea of this is a great place for me and my books. I'll meet readers who are interested in me. I can read other authors, and there are always, different vendors there who provide services for authors. You know what I mean? And you make these connections, and it's not just about signing books. It's about networking. You have to look at it as more than I'm going to sit down and I'm going to sign books.
Yeah, and then, the dressing up thing is perfectly obvious. I mean, who doesn't want to dress up as something?
Exactly.
Yeah, like every Halloween, but lately I've been kind of lazy. I've been dressing as a serial killer because they look like everybody else. When you look at the whole marketing aspect of it and the pressing of the flesh and the network and everything, I think that a lot of people tend to minimize just how important that can be because you don't know who you're going to run into. What if you run into that one person who has, a blog or even an internet radio show or something that gives you exposure to a brand new group of people who have never heard of you before. And those opportunities come more often than not because that's the collective where these people go and hang out. They go to these events to try to see what, everybody wants to break. What's the next new thing, the next big thing. And if that happens to be you, that's gold. And you don't know.
And bloggers are flooding those events for anybody listening who's even considering. Bloggers are your best friend, and they're flooding those events. They're always there. They come with carts ready for books. You know what I mean? They want to read. They want to review. They're hungry for your work. You just have to be there. Because if like you said, if the right blogger posts anything about you, it's gold. You know what I mean? It's pure gold.
And by and large, they paid you for the privilege when they bought your books.
Exactly.
That's the coolest thing. You could get several tens of thousands of dollars worth of marketing, and they paid you for the privilege. Now, how cool is that?
Exactly. Absolutely. And it's always like awesome because they don't have to write about you. It's their choice.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. And then if they pivot back and they say, hey, I really liked your book. Can you give me a quote? Then you're in.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hey, did you attend C2E2 here?
No, I did not. I did not. Some of my other colleagues in the area were there. I found out about it just a little too late, and it wasn't something that I could work out. But I have friends who work kind of behind the scenes at those events. I'm like, you guys got to start giving me heads up when these things are happening in our area and let me know, like tap me on the shoulder, like come on out. So hopefully they said there's one that's it's like Wizards or something. He said something Wizards, and they are coming back into this area in August, I think. So I'm trying to I'm tapping, let me know what the dates are because August is when I'll be going to the big, the Once Upon a Books event. So I'm really hoping that those two aren't on the same weekend and I can be there.
Yeah, I think that is that the Wizards one. Is that the one that they had in Schaumburg?
Yes. And he said that they're coming back to the area.
Okay. Yeah, I have not attended these things mostly because I don't like people. But I'm just being honest. I'm that old guy. I'm that old guy chasing the kids off my lawn. Okay, that's me. It doesn't sound like me. I don't sound that old, but oh yeah, I'm plenty old. Mm-hmm. But I also realize that there's good utility in me, going to especially the local events because. Local press every now and then they'll have a slow day and they'll go, oh well, can we do a quick 6-minute thing on so and so or something like that? So, the networking, as you said, is an indispensable tool of getting your marketing groove on because again, you don't know when something like that can break things loose for you. So, being prepared and doing it is a lot better than just saying you're a crappy old man and staying home. So I know the error of my ways, so I'll try to do better in the future. And then, let me ask you this. How did you find blacksciencefictionsociety.com?
I have a friend in the author community. Her name is Drea. And when I first started trying to figure out how to, increase visibility, she was one of the names that came across me, and we started talking, and she linked me to all of these other authors, and the site came up so many times. People were like, try this, you go on there, there's some good people in there. And I started an account, and then I kind of didn't really use the account. So in the last few months, I'm like, you know what, I really want to be in and see what's happening in this group. And I'm in there and I'm reading some of the stuff, and I see pictures and the artwork, and I'm like, oh my God, I should have been utilizing this site so long ago. Instead, I had an account that wasn't active. So now I'm trying to be more active and be a part of the community, and I love it. Like, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, but I haven't found any place else like it in terms of, the breadth and depth of talent. Especially when you talk, black science fiction, black art, black fantasy, black horror. It's and then you throw that whole Afrofuturism aspect at it, and it's a site whose time has definitely come. There's so much creativity there that people can spend quite a few hours just seeing the wide variety. So, I always try to recommend it to people so that people can find can find great content and new things. Here's the thing: when you look at today's entertainment in America, obviously we have comic book movies, and that's probably the biggest money-making trend in entertainment. But then when you look at smaller movies, when you look at television shows, when you look at memes, when you look at YouTube video channels and things like that, there's not a lot of creativity out there other than, you look at urban entertainment, you look at the kind of short stories we're pumping out, and it's pretty remarkable because it is so different from everything else that has gone before it, that I think that's one of the reasons why it's starting to catch on and getting more of a following. When you write, do you, speaking from the perspective of race, I know strong women are definitely, on your radar as far as, putting together your stories. How much of a role does race play in your writing? Hello?
Hello? I think
hello?
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry, just a little, I guess, cell reception. But I have African American characters. I have some that are not. Because, like I said, I don't write my characters to fit into one box. And I did run into readers who were not happy with me, because they read my first series, and here it is, the main character is this young African American woman, and they come back later and read a later series where the character is, the main character is Latina, or a mix of the two. Anyway, she's not all African, and it's like I see the color of my skin every day. You know what I mean? Like, I understand, but I want to write my characters true to them. As it is today, I don't really have very many Caucasian characters, and I don't have any lead Caucasian characters. That is just how it happened. You know what I mean? It's not because I wrote it that way. That's because this is what I connect to. This is what I understand. And I don't want to try to write a way that I don't naturally understand, because then it feels forced and it feels wrong, and a reader can tell that, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Why are you writing this? You know what I mean? This is not naturally something that you would understand. Why are you writing this? That's just like with the urban fiction. A lot of people, well, why aren't you writing this? I can't write that. When it comes to, like, somebody growing up in the hood. Yes, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. That's where I resided, but my mother took me out of that area almost every day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So my experience was not the same. So to go back now and try to write it like I grew up, you know, you know, in the terrace or something, people are going to be like, that's none of this sounds right. And it's because it's not true to me. You know, I love writing. I'm more about the character. I want people to pick up the book and connect with the character and not focus. I rarely mention race in my books. You know, you might be able to pick it up from their description, but I don't say, oh, he was African American or anything like that. Like, if you identify with the character, then awesome, you know.
Right. Well, no, I mean, some people, you know, I write about issues of race and exclusion and things like that, and you know, obviously race plays a factor, but I'm like you, my characters are all over the map, you know.
Right.
So, or at least the one, So I'm always curious about that because, you know, that some people have an axe to grind. Some people just write because, you know, like several authors who I've interviewed do children and young adult books. And one of the reasons why they focus on African American characters is they want characters that look like their target readers, you know, young Black kids. And you know, that's pretty important because there's empowerment in kids seeing those kinds of images, especially where they weren't. I mean, you know, I think the perfect example is having a Black woman on the bridge of the Enterprise, even though the other Black guy had a red shirt on and he died 6 minutes into the show.
Right, absolutely.
Still, it gives kids something to look at. You know, there's a whole generation of kids that's growing up right now who have Black kids who haven't been alive when there hasn't been a Black president. You know, which is something to think about. You know, in terms of people being able to look around and see things that they can aspire to, and have them look like them. You know, rather than relegated to some other, if not race, but some other class of person. So that, you know, that's one of the reasons why I ask. And then what's the general age range that you focus on? You know, would you consider any of your books to be young adult or even for teenagers?
Yeah, my first series is strictly young adult, like I said, because it takes you through growing up and becoming a woman. And like it's very focused on these 5 young women,
right.
You know, teenage women. Actually, they're teenagers when the story starts, and they have to figure out how to be. And I think, like you said, the message for, you know, you want someone to look at this book and identify with it. I wanted, and it wasn't something that was totally conscious when I first wrote it, but through writing the, you know, second and third books, I really wanted young women to pick up this book and be able to say, oh my God, here you have all these different women. They're all amazing in their own right, but they have so much that they need to do. They have to go through so much to get to these points where they're like, I am who I am. You know, they feel strong and they have, you know, the strength. And that was more important to me because I have younger female cousins who, you know, they were lost. And I'm like, this is how I feel. And I wanted to give them something. And I gave those books to them. And I said, read this. And they would come back to me and they would talk to me about what they read in those pages. And that, I think, is what really inspired me to, you know, continue writing that series, to see them come back and say, oh my God, she's going through so much, and that's how like she said this on this page, and sometimes I feel like that. And it's like, yes, sometimes all women feel like that, you know what I mean? It gives you something to connect with. And I think a lot of young women, you know, sadly don't have someone who they can talk to or who they can identify with to help them through those times. So if anybody can pick up my book and get that from it, you know, it's awesome.
Man, well, you know, we've run out of time, and I want to thank you for being here. And you know, this you know, the fact that, well, it was a great interview because there was so much that you gave, and there's so much information about not only what you did, but how you did it and why your process turned out the way that it did. So I want to thank you for being here. And like I said, one of these days we're going to run into each other, or maybe we'll meet at a con or something, or even like I said, I'll buy you lunch someplace next time you're in town. Give me some time, and I'll try to make sure that I can get some dispensation from the whole ankle bracelet situation.
Okay.
But it was a pleasure meeting you, and it's nice to have someone from around home being on the show, because even though I'm excited when I see people everywhere else, and people from Kenya even show up in the chat room, it's been great. I even interviewed somebody in the islands, so this was great. And thanks for taking the time, because it's been great for me. You made it very, very easy for me. And if Jarvis is listening, and he takes himself off mute, we can have him wish everybody a good night, and we can get the hell off the phone. And also, Kenya here. And then the other thing is stay on the line after he closes out the show in case anybody has any last-minute questions for you, okay?
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Jarvis?
Hey, what's going on, people? I want to thank everybody remotely involved in this project tonight. I've learned so much. I'm sitting here taking notes. You schooled me on things in terms of marketing and branding and things of that nature, because that's something I'm really interested in. And I'm glad that you're thinking along those lines and sharing what you've experienced, because that's one of the biggest things when you're a creator. Nobody can support you if they don't know you exist. And so getting the word out by marketing and promoting, branding, and things of that nature is of the utmost importance. And thank you again, Will, for making it entertaining. I'm sitting here, I'm just enjoying myself and listening. I really mean that the 2 hours that went by was so fast, it felt like about 30, 45 minutes. And I'm looking up like, oh, man, it's about to be over. But yeah, it's a really, really great show. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for sharing, and continue to come on the site and share what you're doing. And let's just make it a not one-to-one thing, but more of a real community where we share information with each other, we promote each other, and that's how we've been able to survive over the last 8 years. As a quick example, over the last 8 years, I've seen about 20 sites that are similar come and go because they weren't community-based. They're based around an individual or a clique of people here and there. But you have a full community. People are contributing and sharing information and buying and supporting each other. That's how we move forward. So thank you, everybody, for supporting us, and we'll continue to support you.
All right, then, and once again, thank you, Jessica. We were listening to Jessica Cage as a special guest tonight. Tune in next Friday night. We'll have another new exciting guest, and I hope everybody has a great week ahead.
All right, thanks, everybody.
All right, good night, Jessica. But don't hang up.
Thank you, good night. Okay.